Jane is one of the most hated characters in The Walking Dead Season 2, behind Sarah, of course. But there are a few who I've seen will defend Jane to their grave, and I'm wondering why that is. Why is the fandom so divided when it comes to Jane? I'd like to explore the middle area with Jane's past and how it affected Clementine, and sometimes not for the better. And no, I'm not just making this video to prove I'm not a Jane stan after making my video about Kenny's abusive behavior. I don't side with either of them. I believe them to be both broken from their environment and upbringing in the apocalypse. This isn't a video about who's worse or better, or about who had it worse in the apocalypse. This is about Jane's past and how it caused her to act the way she is now, affecting Clementine in the process. And I'm going to give Jane as much understanding and empathy as I can, as much as I did for Kenny's character. But our main problem here is that we don't know Jane as well. It's easier to label Kenny as an abuser because we've seen his past and what led him to end up the way he is now, as well as using his past with Clementine as a way to almost control and excuse the things he does. But with Jane, we don't have a past with her. But let's gather the evidence that we have. When we first meet Jane, she comes off as a cold, closed-off loner who can be kinda badass at times. But when proving our usefulness, Jane seems to take a liking to us. This already tells us a lot about her character. Being a useful ally in the apocalypse is crucial and seems very important to Jane. She already seems against being in a big group once they escaped Carver. We know she likes most of the group, some even a little too much.
Whoa, hello? Jesus,
but they all bring their own trouble to the table, like Kenny's aggressive behavior or Rebecca's baby. We can see in Jane's clothing and advice that she gives to Clementine that she is a true survivalist. Her hair is cut short, she wears a leather jacket to avoid walker bites, and gives Clem a screwdriver as an easier weapon to use. She advises her that being alone is one of the best options, and teaches her about looting dead walkers. But when it comes to the difficult choice of saving Sarah, Jane is pushing Clem to focus on herself, and not let Sarah drag her down.
She doesn't want to go, you can't make her! Don't let her take you down too.
It seems like Jane has lost almost all empathy for other people who aren't going to be able to keep up. But there's a reason for this. You see, Jane had a sister named Jamie, and at the beginning of the apocalypse, she grew heavily depressed to a point that Jane would have to drag her across states, sometimes even having to carry her. And when Jane didn't have the strength to keep both her and her sister alive, she leaves her on the rooftop to get eaten by walkers. Specifically, they had to jump across a building, and she physically couldn't make her sister jump. It seems like a lot of people, or at least the few I've seen talk about Jane and her sister, seem to blame Jamie's death on Jane, or at least don't see it as a good enough reason to why Jane is the way she is. It's clear she gave her sister everything she got, but Jamie just simply didn't want to live anymore. This isn't Jane's fault, as it was Jamie's own choice, and she shouldn't be blamed for her sister's demise. And after Sarah's demise, either leaving her to die in the trailer park or getting eaten by walkers, Jane decides to leave the group after Rebecca gives birth. The correlation of Sarah and Jamie was too much, and brought back too many memories of the past that she couldn't stand to go through it again. But Jane offers Clementine something that I think signifies a lot. She gives her a nail filer, which, if you remember, Jane tells us about Jamie always keeping one on her. She sees Jamie and Clementine as a younger sister, but Clementine is a better alternative, seeing as she can actually take care of herself and protect herself. This is great until it isn't, but we'll come back to this later. When Jane returns to save us from the shootout, you can choose the specific dialogue.
You can still leave, you know. There's nothing holding you here.
I sorta wish that was true.
I can see this for two reasons. Either Jane came back for Clementine, or Luke, or both. Although Jane's quick hookup with Luke might be seen as nothing, we don't really know what they talked about while they were alone together. People connect through trauma, and one thing would have led to another. Some people might have seen this as selfish of Luke and Jane, which I somewhat agree with, but it seemed like a spur of the moment, and they were probably just trying to find something else to think about rather than the desperate situation that they were already in. So, trauma bonding plus devil's tango could equal strong connection formed between Jane and Luke. Although Jane did state that 90% of the reason she came back was for Clem, and my best guess is that the other 10% was for Luke, likely feeling guilty for leaving him after having such a personal moment together. A lot of people seem to think Jane never gave Kenny a chance, when in reality she just saw him for what he truly was, and knew Clementine was the only way to keep him at bay. She kept her distance from him and reminded Clementine of who he was. She's been keeping her cool around Kenny, but at this point it's getting harder for her to do. By the time Luke dies, Jane already starts to regret her decisions for coming back, which kinda hurts to hear. It starts to feel like she'd rather it just be her and Clem, with lots of tension growing between Kenny and Mike, along with the baby that needs food, It's all starting to fall apart just like she said. It's by now, Jane is starting to pressure us that it's either her or Kenny, no in between. She starts to get a little territorial with Clementine, if that makes any sense. She doesn't even like the idea of Clem getting close to AJ.
I guess we're getting close. That's what worries me.
The point where Jane gets dangerous is when she starts fighting with Kenny, specifically when they're driving in the middle of a snowstorm. Jane is the most aware person about Kenny's personality, so egging him on while he's behind the wheel isn't a good idea. If Jane has Clementine's safety in mind, she would have waited for this conversation once they at least found shelter. Is it Jane's responsibility to keep him in check? No, it shouldn't be anyone's job except his. And you could argue that there would never be a good time to talk about Kenny's behavior, but they're already in such a messy situation, and Kenny is a ticking time bomb about to go off. And honestly, I couldn't agree with either of them in this situation. When finding half of the road blocked off with cars, Kenny goes to find Diesel in some of them. Jane even taking this opportunity to pressure Clementine to abandon Kenny, eventually making her hit the gas to avoid walkers. Even though I'm sure they could have just waited for Kenny. Back the car up in reverse, I don't know. Clementine, not knowing how to drive, eventually crashes into a walker, and Jane abandons the car. After fighting our way through the blizzard, we meet up with Kenny and Jane missing the baby, making us believe that somehow AJ died in Jane's care. She then tells us something that literally makes me fume with anger.
You have to trust me.
No!
You're gonna see what he
I
really
can't.
is.
What? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean?
This could be her trying to warn us, but it also sounds planned, premeditated. I made the choice to kill Kenny, and once Jane revealed she was hiding the baby all along, I was livid. Jane made us shoot the longest person we'd known in the apocalypse, just to make us go with her.
So you put AJ in danger and got my friend killed just to prove a point?
The desperate attempt for Jane to not be alone again. She wanted control of the situation, meaning she needed Kenny dead. I didn't go with Jane, and I hate it when people chastise others for shooting Kenny. In that moment, he was dangerous, but that doesn't excuse Jane's actions for causing the disaster. So in the end, I left them both in the snow, alone. It's a truly depressing ending that could have gone totally different if Jane really had Clementine's best interest. They could have probably made it to Wellington with what little gas they had left, or at least avoid the snowstorm until it passed to walk the rest of the way. Although there are plenty of reasons for why that couldn't work, but she didn't even give the hope to try. If you were hoping I'd be siding with Jane, or hoping I'd claim her as an abuser, then I'm sorry that this wasn't what I concluded from this video essay. Jane is a hopeless manipulator, and finally found someone she could get used to, but like Kenny, she went too far to try and protect her. I don't think I'd classify Jane as an abuser because she simply doesn't really care enough for Clementine throughout the beginning of the game. She knows that Clem is smart, but she isn't emotionally invested enough with Clementine until near the very end of the game when she returns to the group. She isn't pulling the strings or trying to make Clem leave with her after Rebecca gives birth. She really doesn't force Clem to do anything until it's just her and Kenny left. By then, Clem is all Jane has left, wanting to protect her as much as possible, which makes Jane go do her stupid decision of hiding AJ. At the end of episode 5, it's 50-50 on shooting Kenny or letting him kill Jane, and only 25% of people left alone like I did. I could see people's reasoning for staying with Jane, whether they found her actions justified or they believed it to be a better chance for survival. Some could see her actions as just wanting to protect Clementine. I would consider her a better alternative to Kenny, especially with her having a much better track record besides preferring to be alone, but she broke Clementine's trust. And at the end of the day, trust is all you have left in the apocalypse.
God damn it.
Clem?